Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrobin. Cantor Jeff Klepper is widely considered one of the pioneers of modern American Jewish music. He was one of the first cantors to champion congregational singing and to use a guitar in Jewish worship. For his role in creating a contemporary Jewish musical style, Jeff is irrefutably responsible for changing the sound and the story of American synagogue music. In the early 70s, Jeff teamed with a youth movement leader and future Rabbi Dan Freelander to compose and perform some of the first reimagined Jewish American songs. The duo called themselves Kol Beseder, Everything's Okay. They blended the sophisticated melodies and harmonies of folk rock music with the fervor of Israeli and Hasidic song. In 1974, the duo composed, wait for it, Shalom Rav, we all know it and love it, which has become, as you all know, the defining melody of a new style of Jewish worship, connecting past and present. Now so commonly used in services of all denominations, many regard it as a traditional melody much older than 3 decades. Welcome to the broadcast, Jeff and Danny.
Thank you.
I am talking to the Simon and Garfunkel of Jewish music, or otherwise the Beatles. Pick your analogy. You're iconic. And a lot of people, I would say, my children's age, don't realize what you all created, which is, it's just a little bit of a shonda. How do you feel, by the way, about the fact that your music is everywhere, but you're not necessarily household names? Jeff?
You hit the nail on the head. I was warned by a friend of mine who teaches ethnomusicology in a university, and he said, once your song goes around the world, nobody's going to know your name anymore. They'll know the song, and that's fine. That's fine by me.
So, Dan, let's start with where you met, and then we'll get a little bit of your Jewish bio so people know your background.
Jeff and I met in 1971. We were both teaching religious school in large Reform congregations in New England. And the curriculum was not exactly exciting. And our job was to get the students engaged in singing on a Shabbat morning or Sunday morning. So we went to a teachers conference together. I think it was in Hartford. And Jeff and I were both undergraduates at the time. And we started complaining to one another about the bad stuff we had to teach, and decided we were going to write 1 or 2 songs that were in Hebrew, because don't forget, this is post-67 war, and we were trying to infiltrate Hebrew into these classical Reform synagogues. And
because that's not where Hebrew was, you're saying?
There was no Hebrew singing before 67,
in Reform synagogues.
In Reform synagogues.
Hine Matov.
Maybe, but not in worship even.
Yeah.
So we decided to write...
People weren't wearing yarmulkes either.
No, this is a real transitional period.
Right, I just want our viewers to remember that.
And we wanted songs to sound more like what our students were listening to on the radio or listening to elsewhere.
Pop songs or singer-songwriter songs.
Exactly. But we wanted to use comfortable melodies to teach Hebrew texts, including difficult Hebrew texts and difficult Hebrew pronunciation, like the chet or chaf.
Is that what you mean by difficult? Not the ideas were difficult?
We weren't translating too much. We would translate, but we're talking about 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders. So they weren't going to remember what the songs meant. And that's really a key to our songwriting. That first we'd teach them a melody they wanted, they'd memorize the words to it, and eventually they'd learn, whoa, this unlocks a whole bunch of Jewish tradition for us when they learned what it really meant.
It's wonderful. So it's almost like they don't even realize they're learning when they're learning, because the melody's so catchy and it's very repeatable. I mean, that feels like It's very accessible. It's not like, atonal. It's really tuneful.
And we were determined that it sounded different than what they were hearing in the sanctuary on Friday night or Saturday morning.
Which was formal and staid and frontal.
And with the organ and with the choir performing. This is for the Jews to perform, not for the choir to perform.
So Jeff, you're the musician, am I right? Or you're the guitar player?
Well, I'm the guitar player. I'm the band.
You're the band.
Yeah.
And you're good.
I'm sorry.
You're a good guitar player. Like some people would say, I'm
not
fine.
great. I'm not great. I'm
He's
okay.
He's too
I'm
modest.
asking the expert
Beseder.
musician.
That's why we call ourselves Beseder. We're
Like you're
okay.
fine.
We're okay. This is living room music. In other words, you talked about influences before. So Simon and Garfunkel, folk music, great. Beatles, that's where I went to college. Beatles, instead of going to classes, I would listen to the Beatles, but I really studied their music for a long time. But the person who really was most influential was Pete Seeger.
Love Pete Seeger.
I know you do, and many millions do. And Pete exemplified something Danny hinted at, but is so important. You have a song, you hear the song, oh, that's a lovely song, but you haven't internalized the song until you sing it. And so I remember being 7 years old at Carnegie Hall and Pete Seeger's teaching whatever it was, Michael, row the boat ashore, or keep your hand on the plow, hold on, or gospel songs, spirituals, and songs of peace, songs of Bob Dylan. But when the crowd sings the songs, suddenly, the distance between people melts away. Now, take that one step further. We're at camp, and Danny would always, elbow me when we knew that people were getting it and getting into it, because suddenly people get closer and they hold hands and they sway back and forth. This is Jewish camps, and it's those moments that make the memories.
So what was the first song? What was your very first composition together?
Modeh Ani.
So tell us about that. Jeff, you start with that.
I understand we have a tape coming of that. Well, it was really Danny's idea, because the year before we wrote our first song, Debbie Friedman, not even a year before, had come out with the late Debbie Friedman, of course, who we loved, came out with her first album called Sing Unto God. And
1972.
It's 1972, and so now we went to different colleges, of course. Danny was at Trinity in Hartford, I was at Clark in Worcester. So it must have been during a vacation, like a winter break, and or maybe it was the end of the summer, perhaps.
It's okay.
It doesn't matter, because Danny said, let's write a song, and I said, okay, what should it be? And then Danny referenced the fact that he was about to teach music to second graders, and what would be a good song for a Sunday morning, hint, Sunday morning for second graders, and I thought, let's write Modeh Ani, which we knew, but we didn't know a catchy melody for.
And that's the morning prayer for gratitude. You're supposed to basically say it before you get out of bed. Thank you for returning my soul to me.
Right.
And
you can say it any time, but it's in the morning liturgy.
right. And so what were you trying to accomplish before we play that clip? It's obviously got to be singable, but what's your thinking about, like, what's going to get the kids to sing it, or is the idea of, like, I want them to get the idea of gratitude for God?
Gratitude is the idea. That's the theme. You sing this and express your thanks to God.
And these are second graders, so it has to be catchy. It has to be something you can clap along with. It has to have a call and response, an echo, if you will. And the goal was I wanted them to learn this text. How do we do it? What's going to make it acceptable to them? It's not going to be a beautiful melody. It's going to be a melody they want to sing over and over.
And it's obviously the Hebrew prayer, but is it also English?
That great point I was just about to say. If we were writing that song today, there would probably be an English verse or an English line. But this was back in the
This is part of the rebellion against English singing in Reform synagogues. That took place in the late 60s and way into the 70s.
Hymns.
Yeah, that we wanted it to sing Hebrew in our congregations. So it's not until the 1980s when Debbie did something like Lechi Lach or the Misha Berach that combined Hebrew and English that we had the courage to start doing some things in English. Yes, but don't forget, Modeh Ani comes out just a couple months after Debbie's album comes out, and we knew Debbie, and whoa, if you can actually publish these things and have people listen to them, put them on records, well, we can do that too. It gave us permission to move ahead.
Okay, so let's play that song right now.
Modeh Ani lefanech
So it's wonderful. It's a wonderful song. I want to pick up, Danny, on what you said, which is that you were pushing back on the English that was happening in synagogues. But at the same time, you're upending a certain kind of orthodoxy, if you'll excuse the term, about Jewish music, where people are kind of saying, this is like singing folk songs instead of liturgy. And that's heretical on some level.
But Israel's key here. You know, this is post-1967 war. Israel is the hero. It's before 1973. So we wanted to identify with Israel, and Israel's pouring out this wonderful music from the Hasidic Song Festival, like Al Shlosha Devarim, or Ohoseh Shalom Bimromav. Just dozens of wonderful, wonderful songs.
You have a nice voice.
I discovered him.
I'm actually the trained musician before he was a trained musician, but that's
we'll get to that. But is this Arik Einstein too, or that's?
You'd say yes. Yeah.
Same time
Ani
period.
ve'ata. We were wowed by what the Israelis were producing, and why weren't we producing this stuff? So we jumped on the bandwagon, and the question was, what's the relationship between what we're writing and worship and services? Our stuff wasn't intended for worship initially. It was intended for religious schools.
And camps.
It was intended for camps. But eventually we were writing liturgical texts. And so when we wrote, Modani, or Lo Alecha, or Zaro, that wasn't something that's in the weekly liturgy. But as soon as we got to Shalom Rav, and any of the later pieces, then we were already stepping on toes of those people who were in control of the worship setting.
So let's talk a little bit about the pushback before we get to Shalom Rav. Like, when did you begin, Jeff, to sense that some people were uncomfortable with this?
Well, firstly, if kids are singing at camp, nobody cares. It's the kids. They're at camp. Let them have a good time. So
but when they come home and they say to their Cantor, why can't we sing this?
Yeah, we learned this great song or this and that at camp. And in the early days, meaning in the early 70s, much of the energy to help this new music, to nurture this new trend, if you will, came from rabbis. A lot of young rabbis. After a few years, I noticed that the rabbis who had been with us as junior counselors and camp rabbis were young student rabbis. They're in the late 60s, early 70s, and they graduated. They went on to their own synagogues, and they started to bring that music in. Why? Because it helped the service, and it gave the congregation some energy, some way to express themselves. So, and then, as you hinted, Cantors took that to be threatening to what they were doing.
And before we get to, I want to hear some of the pushback, because it's kind of hard to fathom now that your songs are everywhere and kind of baked into the fabric of so many of the synagogues we all know. It's hard to remember when you were kind of making such waves and maybe enemies. But in terms of Jewish camp, it feels like, as I read your story, this was so seated in the kind of joy and the gestalt of camp. And for those who, like me, are camp deprived, I never went to Jewish camp. I went to Bucks Rock, which was a work camp in New Milford, Connecticut, which was actually started with a different kind of ethos, but similar. But
or a labor Zionist.
Yes, labor Zionist.
Or labor without the Zionist.
But just what I know I missed, because camp is kind of its own wonderful cult, is not just the memories, but the music. The music is so integral to how people not just love Jewish camp, but decided to become Jewish professionals because of camp. So just, Jeff, you start, and then Danny, just because you write about what camp was kind of like a eureka for you.
It's very simple, and I think it was Shlomo Carlebach who opened the door, because his music I would call neo-Hasidic, wasn't strictly Hasidic, but it had that flavor, and it's impossible to sing those songs without clapping or dancing or jumping up and down. So when we, in the late 60s, were singing, before any of us were writing songs, we were singing the Carlebach tunes and Israeli songs as well, and just pouring out our love of being Jewish on a Friday night.
And go ahead.
But I think there's something more. Everyone has a positive camp experience, regardless of what camp you go to. But what part of the camp experience can you still replicate 20 and 30 and 40 years later? The music you can take with you. The rest of the activity is a memory. So I think that has a lot to do with how Jewish music ended up changing. We had thousands and thousands of young people who went through our camps, who became the rabbis, who became the temple presidents, and this is what they remember. Yep, and they wanted to sing those melodies in the synagogues that they were working with. So, but it was transportable, and that's something that the rest of the camp experience is not.
On that topic, I'll just add, the one who took the brunt of that criticism was Debbie Friedman. And it was sad in a way, brutal. But she did not have the credentials that some of us had as a rabbi or cantor. She was perceived as being an outsider by the establishment. And she took a lot of very pointed and hurtful criticism at the time.
I just want to read, Jeff, something you wrote in the introduction to this wonderful book that we're going to also show about camp. It was my first real Shabbat, feeling completely different compared to lighting candles at home and having dinner with my family. We were a wandering tribe of campers, counselors, song leaders, rabbis, and camp staff, celebrating being Jewish in the Berkshire Mountains under the setting sun of Western Massachusetts. Being a shy first-time camper, I can't believe you were ever shy.
I'm totally shy.
I was walking by myself, but as I looked around, I noticed small groups of kids glomming together, holding hands, talking, laughing, singing. I could see the older campers flirting, wishing each other Shabbat Shalom, and leaning in for a quick kiss. I was walking alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was with my tribe, singing our songs, welcoming Shabbat. It felt perfect. I was home. I just love that.
Thank you.
It makes me want to go back.
Well,
I'm like, make up for lost time.
That'll be a chapter of my memoir someday.
That's fantastic. So Shalom Rav, Danny, you tell me about that.
Well, Jeff and I would write music by me opening the Union Prayer Book. This is 1973-74. And opening to a page and saying, gee, we don't know any melodies that are really singable to this text. And so we'd spend a couple hours writing that music and see if it would work. That's how Shalom Rav starts. This is the fall of 1973. It's a month after the Yom Kippur War. We're both working in congregations where we have to figure out how do we process the Yom Kippur War and teach songs. And Ani V'Ataz had just come out, songs of peace, songs of hope. So we wanted to write a song from the liturgy, from the prayer book itself, that created that sense of peace. And our approach to our songs, you'll hear, we've edited our own songs over the years, but our original approach was really quite speedy. And we sing it in a very different way today. But I think, we're folk singers, so we're going to use the melody in any way that works for the audience, for the crowd that we're working with, or that works for us. And it's not going to be the same year after year.
So just tell people where, for anyone who's not well-versed,
Shalom Rav is the prayer for peace in the afternoon and evening in all Sidurim, and it's the end of the Shemona Esrei of the Amida prayer. It precedes the silent prayer, and it's the Jewish people beseeching God to create peace, great peace, for the Jewish people and for the entire world.
And we didn't appreciate at the time how important a prayer it is. It's the culmination of the Amidah. In other words, you have 18 blessings, or 18 or 19, and it's the last one, as if to say the highest ideal is peace.
And who started this? Like, Danny, are you finding the liturgy first, or you're just talking this back?
I'd find the text.
We each stayed in our lane.
Yeah,
Danny sang,
and
I played guitar.
I'd sing a melody. Jeff would put chords around it. Jeff would play some chords. I'd try to find a melody that fit with it.
We can be very honest today. We're not hiding anything.
You haven't been honest before?
No, well, we, at the beginning, I think we consciously soft-pedaled the idea that we were creating in the style of contemporary folk rock music. So if you look at the song, Shalom Rav, strip away the words, and look at the melody and the chords, you will find a DNA, so to speak, that goes right back to James Taylor,
Yes.
Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills and Nash, John Denver.
Which is exactly what we were listening to at this
It was
at the
American
time.
style folk rock music.
I love, Jeff, that you said at one point, we didn't invent what we created, which is like, you created something, but it wasn't wholly out of...
It was right there.
It was right there. And I love, first of all, the humility of saying that you're drawing from things that exist, but also it's part of why it worked, right? Is that for people who love that, they're responding to something that they're already drawn to.
It was a language, and I'll take that a step further. It's really about culture. Every community has its own culture. If you go to a Lubavitch shul, you'll see a lot of davening, and then you'll see at certain points people dancing, well, the men, dancing and expressing themselves in that way. That's anathema to someone who grew up in a classical reform synagogue. The culture at camp, very much in the modern spirit, kids listening to the radio, Beatles, Joni Mitchell, whatever. And this was just, they took it in. People, they just sucked it in and embraced it because they said this belongs to us.
So did you have any idea that this was going to be your hit of hits? Like, when you were done with it, were you thinking...
That song?
Not initially.
I think so.
Within a few years, you never know when you write a song
It takes off.
if people are going to accept it.
Yeah.
At camp, we wrote dozens of songs, most of which we chucked. We'd write it at night. We'd try it the next day at lunch or dinner. And after 2 or 3 times, if the community didn't respond to it, didn't sing it, okay, it's not going to work, or we have to revise it. Shalom Rav is one of those songs that took off from the very beginning.
And when you say that, what do you mean? People are like, right away getting it? They want it again? Like, what are the signs?
Let me jump in here. Because when we wrote the song and we finished it, there were 2 major sessions that we had. First, we wrote
at camp.
At camp, we wrote the chorus.
Are you counselors at this point?
We were counselors at camp, but Danny was a supervisor, and I was the song leader. So we're part of the camp system. We wrote the chorus and maybe part of the first verse. Then we came home from camp. And then maybe a month or 2 went by, and we were both living in Boston, near Boston at the time, and we would get together every week or every couple of weeks just to sit and see if we could create something. So at some point, one of us said, hey, let's finish that Shalom song. And so we had a second session at my apartment in Allston, Massachusetts. And we went back and forth, and we had forgotten part of what we did previously. So I had a tape recorder, and I taped us writing the song.
Oh, wow.
And if you go to kolbeseder.com, there's a page dedicated to Shalom Rav with videos and posters and articles and such. And you can listen to the entire 18-minute tapes with stops and starts. At the end of the tape, we were all done with the song. We put it together, and I said, and you can hear faintly on the tape, wait till Louis hears this. Now, unless you know who Louis is, Louis was the
dear friend.
third member of the Kol Beseder singing trio from New York. He moved to Texas, and that's how we became a duo as opposed to a trio.
I knew it was going to be a hit
Yeah.
when at our the first performance Jeff and I ever gave publicly
At Brandeis.
was at Brandeis University in February of 1974, and my girlfriend at the time brought a friend of hers from Mount Holyoke to hear us sing, and that woman said to the person who brought her, she loved that song. She says, "I'm going to marry that guy," and I'm still married to her 47 years later.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let's play Shalom Rav so we can hear it. This is from 1978.
Late 70.
1978.
Oh, 78.
Yeah. Okay.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam.
That was wonderful. I have to say that there's a clip that I have replayed maybe too many times to admit, where Ben Platt, who played Evan Hansen, sings with Cassie Levy, who was the lead of Frozen, and I've seen her in other wonderful things like Hair. And they sing on stage. I don't know where they were.
It was at JTS. It was a Ramah reunion of some kind.
It was a Ramah reunion, and they both sang like this was our favorite song at camp. And just the idea that these two Broadway stars have exactly that same
Yep.
Jewish camp DNA and sing your song together so beautifully.
There was I don't remember what year this was, but Broadway Cares every year does an album of Christmas music. And one year,
was thinking the same.
Shalom Rav showed up on their Christmas
Sung by the cast of Mamma Mia.
Oh my God. Did they do a good job?
No comment. You know, you unlocked another memory of mine. I recall, and you may recall as well, in the 1980s, Peter, Paul, and Mary began to become interested in Jewish topics and went to Russia and met with refuseniks and so on. A friend of ours, Rabbi Daniel Syme, was very close to Peter, Paul, and Mary. And he, Rabbi Syme, was trying to get them to maybe sing some of these new Jewish songs, the Debbie Friedman, Kol Beseder type songs. They ended up doing one.
They did one.
They did a song called Dodi Lee. But I do remember Danny Syme, Rabbi Syme, saying to me, I pitched them Shalom Rav, but Mary couldn't get the ch, the ch sound, which is a Jewish sound. You know.
So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that you're not exactly like rock star personalities.
Hardly.
And I'm just wondering if you can kind of diagnose your own success together, both as collaborators, but also as performers, because I think, look, other people, you know, generations now have sung these songs and make them their own, and I know you want them to. But just the fact that you two seem pretty low-key, not exactly like, look at me, stand back.
Yeah, I will say this. If you look at famous singing duos in history, Everly Brothers, Simon and Garfunkel, it doesn't end well. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes closeness, too much closeness, creates...
Backfires.
And ours succeeded because, A, we both had professional careers that were very different fields. I did Jewish organizational work for 50 years, 40 years. Jeff worked in the congregations as a cantor for 40. So we had straight jobs for most of the time. And then we'd get
This was our release to sing together.
and we lived in different cities most of the time.
Yeah.
So when we'd get together to do music, that's the vacation from work.
And what about your performing talent? Like, you've been honest about saying you're not the best singers, I'm just like, you don't have, well, Danny's not
He's too
buying
modest.
that.
No,
Listen, I was a voice major in college. I've been singing my whole life, and I still sing.
I
with
love your
choirs.
voices. Let me just put that
And,
marker down. But
we
I'm
have-
saying you have said yourselves that that's not necessarily what you lead with.
Yeah, well, it's not. It's not.
No, it's our personalities.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a little bit.
We're the
of an
Smothers.
odd-
We're the Smothers
we're
brothers sometimes.
we are a bit of an odd couple, especially back in in olden times. But I will tell you this: when we first met and started singing at youth group gatherings in the early '70s around Boston, I barely sang. I didn't have. My voice has gotten beat up. I don't sing well anymore. But I had that kind of folky, very sort of Bob Dylan-ish kind of voice. Danny had the trained voice. So when we first started, we would harmonize for sure in a kind of an Everly Brothers style. But oftentimes I would just play guitar and let Danny sing, pop in a few harmonies. And then over time we created the back and forth and the harmony singing. The only other point I will make is that as we talked a little bit about comedy before, I was the guy who always, made the little joke, the pun, and
I was a straight man.
I had to bring Danny along with me, and he eventually learned the comic timing,
Right,
so we can go back and forth. Yeah.
You mentioned Debbie Friedman, and obviously she's formative and did take a lot of flack in the beginning. But just in terms of your relationship with her, was that seamless? Was that always
Seamless, Gaval. Nothing was
nothing
seamless
was seamless
with
with
Debbie.
Can you share a little bit of the behind the scenes?
This was Debbie's life. We had other lives we were living besides our music life. So Debbie was hypersensitive. She insisted that people sing the song her way. And if the audience didn't get it, she would stop them and she'd correct them. We were much more flexible with that. But we were with Debbie at zillions of conferences, and we were really doing very much the same stuff. But she did it full time, and it was she bore, as Jeff said, she bore the brunt of the anger in part of the established music community.
And
would you ever sing together? Was that something that you
Sure.
You did that a lot?
I have an album that will be, it's kind of a plug, still in the post-production phase. I did a concert with Debbie in 1992 at the group that we founded called Hava Nashira, which was a song leader training camp. And we did an informal, like a coffee house concert one night. I had it professionally recorded, which is not a big deal. There's a couple of mics and a guy, friend of mine, recording it. And that sat in a drawer for many years. And I recently found it, and it's coming out. Jeff and Debbie singing at Hava Nashira. But I wanted to say about Debbie, in the early years, we were very cordial. We didn't know each other well. Debbie was flying around the country at that point, promoting her music, just getting a start. We were kind of competitors in that way.
In a small field.
And Debbie might write a song that was a great song, and I would go, how can I write a song, not to imitate that, but a song that has that particular kind of mood or feeling.
But we did take some Debbie Friedman songs and do our own arrangements, most of which she hated.
Yeah.
And then Debbie would perform Shalom Rav, but she did it differently than we did it.
She taught us how to sing it.
And,
Wow, that's powerful. What do you mean?
We would come to groups and they would say to us, we're singing it wrong. Debbie Friedman taught it to us. And
No, it wasn't the notes.
At the end of the second verse,
pauses.
she would go, Bishlomecha.
And silence.
Then Shalom
That is how I
Rav.
heard it.
But that was her
That was her.
cover of our song.
She said to me,
and at a certain point we said, if you can't beat him, join him.
she said, Klep, you're singing it wrong. She said that she called me Klep all the time. In my synagogue, she said, you're singing it wrong.
Wow.
And she taught us how to do it.
So just before we leave the pushback, I just want to give people a more specific flavor. Rabbi Jeffrey Salkin, who I've interviewed actually for his books, when he was a student rabbi, he published an article entitled "The New Trend in Synagogue Music," and he got a very angry letter back.
He got lots of angry
Lots of letters back. And this one, it was from a Cantor, but we don't name,
we cannot say the name.
but you know the name.
Yeah.
Okay. And this Cantor wrote to Jeff Salkin, but this is about your music and others.
This was not your Cantor, by the way.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Your opening paragraph, in which you state, quote, "A new style of music is changing the way Reform Jews pray," is misleading, if not untrue. You should have said, "in which some adolescents pray," and you would have come closer to the truth. And then he goes on to say, "We are living in a period of mediocrity in America. We all know what a boringly low level of taste is created by the leveling influence of television. My fellow and sister Cantors and I struggle onward to keep our music of the temple on the highest Jewish level possible. I stress Jewish because where else may a Jew hear authentic Jewish music but in a temple? Do you think Jews can long tolerate the mediocrity of folk rock tunes like Shalom Rav?
Ouch.
Of Danny Freelander as the essence of Jewish music, the moving force of prayer? The audacity of Danny Freelander in, quote, foreseeing that youth music will predominate in the Reform movement is reprehensible." And the last line here, "We have a glorious heritage. Why is the camp not teaching it to our children? Why are novices and non-professionals feeding our children folk rock pap instead of the great traditional melodies?" Ouch. How come you got exempt there?
Because I was the high holiday.
Don't give it away, though.
High holiday rabbi and Cantor at the alternative service in the synagogue where he was the
Okay.
there was a
Cantor,
backstory.
and he was losing attendance in the room he was in to the room I was in. So there was a lot of resentment there.
Wow.
He mentioned, and you quoted those words, the glorious heritage of Jewish music. That's why I became a Cantor, because I wanted to immerse myself in that heritage, which, as you know, extends around the world, and it's so different any place you go, even in this country. It's a wonderful thing it's a great world to live in, this Jewish world, and now, of course, it's exploding, as you know, with new Jewish music.
How did that feel? I mean, maybe you didn't know about that letter, but how did that, I mean, did that hurt, sting, or did it roll off of you? Guys?
We had a mission. After a few years, we realized that we were making a difference. And so we just kept right on doing. But I'll tell you, we converted people. We converted some of the older Cantors and rabbis.
And we were determined to infiltrate that other world and to develop credentials, credibility in that world. So I've always sung in Jewish choral groups, serious Jewish music. Jeff is an ordained cantor and knows traditional nusach. While I was in rabbinical school, because of all of this, I took all the cantorial classes that they would allow me to take. So I wanted to make sure people understood that we do have not just a background, but a love, and it's one of the Jewish musics we love. I sing in a Jewish choral group to this very day. I run the North American Jewish Choral Festival for the past 35 years. So Jewish choral music is really important. The music of the 19th century is still very important. And so we live in all those worlds, but we also think the material that we've written is not the be-all and end-all. It's just an additional part of the Jewish experience.
As long as we're truth-telling here, which is what
this is the table for the truth.
Spill it all. When Danny was working in the Union for Reform Judaism, formerly the UAHC, Union of American Hebrew Congregations, he was responsible for putting on a lot of the programming and the biennials and so forth. And Danny, it's not like he promoted Kol Beseder to the top of the list, because of course Debbie Friedman was there and other folks like Craig Taubman and on and on and on. But having that platform to sing our music to thousands of people was very, very important. And the record albums, Nifty had a series of record albums all through
Make
the
sure
70s.
people know what Nifty is.
Nifty, the North American Federation of Temple Youth, which is back a few minutes ago, starting about Shalom Rav. That, I think, was the actual thing that did it, having it appear on a record album in 1974. And the youth group kids are playing that record till the grooves run out, and they pitch the song to their rabbi and cantor, and it became a thing.
So the kids really, the child will lead you. The kids brought the music.
Kind of,
back. How many albums have you done?
Well,
Probably
the original
10,
albums.
12, and then we had to take some of the cassettes, which no one has cassette players, and we've combined them onto consolidated.
So the anthology that people can get, Kol Beseder Anthology.
Has everything we've ever
everything.
written.
That's everything.
And
And is that on Amazon? Where do they find that?
You will find it on Amazon soon, but Transcontinental Music Publications, very long name, very simple, TMP.
But if we put up the website, what should they look for?
Yeah,
Kol
the Kol
Beseder.
Beseder Anthology, but it's the first songbook in history, I think, that plays itself.
What do you
And
mean?
all you need is a phone, is a smartphone, and every single page of music has a little QR code on the top right corner. You take your phone, you tap a few times, you aim it at the QR, and the phone will play the song
Amazing.
that you're looking at. You don't have to sit at a piano and figure it out.
Wow.
So we had to gather together every single recording we've ever done. Those are reflected in the book.
Wow. Well, you have to have the book, physical book, in your
Yes,
hand.
yes.
Or the PDF, the electronic book,
You
either
can
one.
still do the QR code.
You just
Fantastic.
can't play, you can't have the book on your phone and take a picture of the phone. It doesn't
Got it.
quite work.
Okay. I want to just talk about Freedom Sunday. 1987, you perform is it Washington?
It's
Yes.
at the Capitol.
And that was for Soviet Jewry. How did that
This-
come about?
Well, this was the largest mass assembly of American Jews in history to that date.
Until the post-October 7th
Yeah,
gathering
I think it was
in
something like
November
a quarter of a
23.
million, like a quarter of a million American Jews gathered there, and this is the time of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment, and it was a really important transitional time of getting large numbers of Russian Jews out of the Soviet Union. So we were asked to participate
Because they couldn't get their first
well,
choice.
because they couldn't have women singing at this festival.
Peter, Paul, and Mary.
We're next.
And we have some long-term guilt feelings about that we got the gig because they couldn't have a woman singing in front of a quarter of a million American Jews. But that's an ongoing issue of Kol Isha, and different parts of the community still aren't comfortable with it. Most are.
Yeah. I will tell you one sacred memory that I have. And by the way, we were freezing our buns off. I mean, it was a very cold December day, and we were in
Like today.
scarves and sweaters, and not much different than today. And we had a sound check, and then we would warm up, and then the thing, and there were so many speeches. You can watch it on one of the C-SPAN archives. And at one point, we were singing a medley of faster Israeli songs. We were singing Am Yisrael Chai, and I peeked over my shoulder, and I see Natan Sharansky dancing on the podium just above us, and it was a wonderful moment.
That was amazing. You mentioned new music, and we had at this table Joey Weisenberg and Alana Arian and Noah Aronson and wonderful stuff. But some of it's drawing from what you started, and some of it is a departure. How are you responding to it without naming names? Just generally, where do you see the direction of the new stuff?
We opened the doors, and we're thrilled to see all
Jewish
this
people
creativity.
singing.
Yeah, and seeing this creativity come out. And the principle behind it is the same. You want the Jews to sing. You want the Jews to make the melody and the text their own. So that's a commonality between us. And we're thrilled. These were people who we knew as youngsters who have developed into extraordinary musicians and are really leaving their mark.
when we wrote the bulk of our music in the early days, principally the 70s and 80s, you could count, especially in the 70s, you could count the people doing that on your two hands.
Yeah.
There were less than 10 in the same field as us doing what we were doing, and now there's hundreds and probably thousands. And a lot of it I love, maybe some of it not so much. But the idea that groups are now coming together specifically to sing in a circle with a leader and a supporting crew around them, the stuff that Joey Weisenberg is doing, is phenomenal. And he is himself spawning this new trend. It's very different from what we do, but I think the connective tissue is there.
What is happening when it works? Like, how would you, I know it's hard to deconstruct what makes a song make a spiritual moment, room, connection. What's happening there? How would you diagnose it?
When adult Jews sing, you're letting go. You're showing your vulnerabilities. I think about some of the people I see singing in services are people who you would never catch singing alone. You're part of a community. You're adding your voice and you find out, wow, my voice helps the community become even more. And that's a spiritual moment, realizing that you can participate. You're not going to stick out. That you have a crucial part to play, and it's never going to be as good if you're not a part of it. I think we give people permission to express their deeper emotions and spiritual lives that music can do in a way that text doesn't always do.
Jeff, do you want to add anything?
Well, Danny said a few minutes ago about camp and about how the music provided the memories year after year. And when we would sing at conferences and retreats and conventions, sometimes we didn't realize, but it's true, that the people coming there were looking forward to coming year after year after year, greeting their friends, of course, and singing together. It's one of those things that
because it's the only place they would do that.
You can't really break it down into component parts.
I think about the CAGE conferences that we did for year after year.
Say what that stands for.
CAGE.
The Coalition for Advancement of Jewish Education. And they ran annual conferences all over in college campuses, and they get several thousand Jewish educators, teachers, and we always participated there in one of the major concerts, but the concerts were really sing-alongs. Exactly parallel to what we did with UAHC biennials in the 80s and 90s. They became annual or every other year community gatherings.
Like a Woodstock, like a Jewish Woodstock.
Yeah, even the URJ biennial was like the whole, you had 1,000 people in that room singing. I want to make sure we have time for Yesh Kohavim. Did one of you want to set that up, Jeff?
Well, it started when I lived in Israel for a year. When I graduated cantorial school in 1980, I was a young, impetuous, not yet mature adult. And the idea of taking a traditional cantor's job in the suburbs of New York, New Jersey or Westchester, I could not see myself sitting, teaching the bar mitzvah kids every day. In later years, I embraced it and loved it, and it was an important part of my career. But I did several auditions and couldn't find a place where I felt at home. So, a long story that I won't even get into, it's too many moving parts. I heard that the Leo Beck High School in Haifa, Israel, which had as its leader an American rabbi named Robert Samuels, the late Robert Samuels, was looking for an American cantor or rabbi to come and be an intern, to spend a year at the Leo Beck High School. Well, I was the guy who got the gig, which was perfect because it meant I didn't have to look for a real job. And the year in Israel was so powerful in terms of the Hebrew and the music and seeing and singing with Israeli kids every day. One Shabbat, and I was leading services every week at the synagogue on the campus. One Shabbat, when we came to the mourner's Kaddish at the end, I saw this little Hebrew paragraph next to the Kaddish, and it was a poem by Hannah Senesh, by the great World War II Jewish heroine. And it was a poem which we'll see, and we can talk about it, a beautiful poem that's actually a quote from a letter that she wrote to a relative about someone who had passed away.
Loss.
Saying, and you can imagine Hannah Senesh being, on the shore of the Mediterranean near her moshav, looking at the stars at night, and said, the twinkling of the stars is the memory, inspires the memory of the person.
Jeff returns from Israel, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. This is at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. And so we played out the song and made it more full, but I have a very strong memory. And in January of '87, I was staying at your house in Chicago. We were planning the biennial that year in Chicago, and I got a phone call that my brother had died of AIDS that day. And Yesh Kochavim was the song that Jeff and I wrote that, to me, helped me deal best with the loss and the eternality of someone's soul. And 2 years later at a biennial, we brought the AIDS quilt down the aisle of the convention, about 3,000-4,000 people there, to the music of Yesh Kochavim. So, it became a text in the current Mishkan Tefillah. And so it's become a norm.
We say that text at Central Synagogue. Just in terms of the song, the lyrics are fully Hannah Senesh's.
The Hebrew is verbatim.
And the English is our translation.
And Danny said we need to have an English verse. So I sat with some friends of mine who are Israeli Hebrew speakers and wrote down the meaning and then fashioned it into an English verse. I think the clip we're going to see only has the Hebrew.
But more often than not, I'm going to share the text. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember.
It's incredible.
I wrote the song in Israel towards the end of the year, and I put it on a cassette tape, and I sent it to a few Israeli folks that I knew, musicians, that I had gotten names of, and I got a phone call from one of them who said, "Thank you for the tape. Thank you for the tape." And I said, "Did anything, move you or touch you?" And she said, that song about the stars, Yesh Kochavim. She said, "It sounds very Israeli." And that was the best thing anyone could have said to me, because that's what I was trying to do.
Let's listen to it. So finally, what do you hope people do? Do you want them to go to the anthology? Do you want them to just play the music?
I want them to buy it.
They're going to buy it. At someday you both will be gone. That's just the truth. And your music is going to live. That's an incredible idea. I'm not rushing you, but that's very few people know there's a legacy that strong. I guess I would ask you for a final word on reflecting on that.
Well, that's the exact reason why we did the book and spent 3 years doing it. Danny and I, both retired, had the time to do it because it really was a painstaking process, the editing and writing all the pieces for it. The book, in my mind, is mainly addressed to cantors, song leaders, music directors. They are really the gatekeepers of the music for their community. And it would be, even when we're spinning in our graves, the best thing that can happen is for those folks to keep the music going.
The legacy stuff is very, very personal for me. I have 2 grandchildren who are 7 and 3, and they listen to our
Children's songs.
No, and our other songs in the car with their parents over and over and over, to the point where my son will say, please don't let them listen to this anymore. But for me, when I'm driving and they're in the back seat singing at the top of their lungs something that we wrote 40 years ago or 50 years ago, and my granddaughter comes home from religious school and tells me that I'm singing it wrong because it's not the way she learned it in religious school. And she's starting summer camp, the same camp that Jeff and I worked at this summer as a camper.
Is that Eisner?
At Eisner. There's a continuity there
Incredible.
that feels just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
You know, there's you are the Torah scholar at this table, by the way.
No.
So when I
That's a
reference
low bar.
when I reference Deuteronomy at the end, and the commandment is for Moses to write down the law, there's a quote that I've always loved. I never said it I think I said it to music a long time ago and it didn't really work. But take these words, write them down, and put them in your mouth. Because until you put them in your mouth, until you sing out, as Cat Stevens used to sing, you know, when you want to sing out, sing out. Until that happens, the words are lifeless.
Jeff Klepper, Danny Freelander, this has been such a treat for me and for everyone, I'm sure. Thank you for this conversation and for the music.
Thanks, Anne.
I'm Abigail Pogrubin for In the Spotlight. I look forward to seeing you next time.